Yes. It's time for Elections Hotwired, Volume 1, Issue 3. It's 2 o'clock straight up on KPFK, 90.7 FM in Los Angeles, 98.7 FM in Santa Barbara. I am M.T. Karthik, your guide through this experience. We've been calling Elections Hotwire all summer, and post-November 2nd, Elections Hotwired. I am not an attorney, and I don't play one on the radio. But there remain many questions of a legal nature regarding the election of 2004. And today, on Elections Hotwire, we have a very special guest, a person who has also been watching all of this, of course, because he was a candidate for President of the United States of America on all 50 ballots here in the 50 states of the United States of America. David Cobb, the Green Party presidential candidate. Lots to talk about. Let us do a welcome to our program once again, David Cobb.
Thank you, MT. It's a pleasure to be here and a pleasure to be a peace candidate on Pacifica Radio. And MT, in the spirit of collegial disagreement, let me just point out that under no circumstances can George Bush ever be called the duly re-elected president, because it's important to remember that he was never elected in the first place.
Thank you, sir.
So I want to, in the spirit of complete honest dialogue, let's just make that clear that the Green Party is going to continue to insist that George Bush never won election in 2000. He's been serving as an illegitimate occupant of the White House for the last 4 years, and lo and behold, it looks as if he's about to take office again under what can only be properly described as dubious circumstances, and I hope that we can get into some of the substance of it, because I'll tell you this, I'm not just a candidate, but I'm also a very angry citizen of the United States, as I see another coup, a silent coup, unfold in this country.
Well, I'm very glad to have you here then, because we've been watching it happen as well. We just were saying a moment ago, lots and lots of reports of problems. Is that also what you've been hearing?
There's no doubt about it, MT. The reality is this. At the very least, we have to say that there is a cloud over the legitimacy of the 2004 election cycle. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to ultimately change any of the reported results, but it's very clear we need a healthy discussion of the voting rights violations that clearly occurred in this election. And I think it's shameful that John Kerry, the Democratic Party leadership, are basically capitulating immediately. We are being lied to by the corporate media when they say that this was a basically trouble-free election. That is fundamentally, profoundly not true.
Of course, everybody has been thinking about it, and we've been sending a lot of messages around the Internet, people talking about the many different problems, and we've been considering this issue of how recounts, if they're to be done, are to be done.
Yeah, it's true, MT, and it is important to understand that we, the people in this country, have so limited ability to actually participate in our own elections, much less the fundamental governing institutions. But that's why I'm proud that the Green Party and myself as the Green Party candidate, I can share with you and the listeners of Pacifica that we are quite likely to be demanding a recount in Ohio.
These are the words we've been waiting to hear.
I thought that it might be, MT, and I do want to let you and the listeners know what we have reported already, which are litigation points in Ohio. One, it's very clear that we need to impound the electronic voting machines to investigate the reported problems that voters experienced on Election Day. In Ohio specifically, we know, for example, that there was a, quote, jumping screen problem, end quote. That is where people showed up, and if they made any mistake at all, it apparently showed a default to attempt to register your vote for Bush. Now, if that jumping screen problem turns out to be true, then there are some serious questions about why such a default happened. Was it unintentional or intentional, for example?
There have been complaints in many states, in Florida, in North Carolina, in many other states as well. My understanding is that you will prioritize the state of Ohio. Maybe you could begin by telling us how that decision came about.
Remember, MT, that it's going to cost us $110,000 to demand a recount in Ohio alone. Each state law is different as it relates to how much it costs in order to demand the recount. As you mentioned, it was about $80,000 in New Hampshire, and the reality is that even if they had completely switched the results in New Hampshire, it would not have changed the result of the election. It's pretty obvious that Ohio and Florida are the two states that there may still be the opportunity to delegitimize the Bush administration as it relates to electoral college votes. So that's why Ohio and Florida are the two places that we have put immediate priorities around. Ohio specifically because the number of provisional ballots, the number of spoiled ballots which have been discarded. I mean, did you know that the Republican Secretary of State of Ohio has discarded 92,000 votes?
Yes.
Punch card votes.
Let's talk about this just for a moment. By the way, you are listening to David Cobb, the Green Party presidential candidate on the ballot in all 50 states, and he's telling us that he and his advisors are very strongly considering that in the next 24 hours or so they will seek a recount in the state of Ohio. Maybe you could elaborate about these punch cards.
Well, yes, there are. This Republican Secretary of State of Ohio has discarded that we know of 92,000 ballots. Alleging that there was either an overvote or undervote. In other words, either they voted but didn't vote for president or otherwise voted for two different candidates for president. So, this is one of the issues that came up during Florida, and under a recount, we would demand that those actually be examined. I mean, to simply discard 92,000 ballots is really stunning considering the alleged margin of victory for George Bush. So this notion of simply discarding undervote and overvote without a closer examination bears scrutiny.
David Cobb, I think this is really great that you and your group there, and I assume the party is all with you and behind you in this, have decided to take this on. Do you know if maybe some of this Bush v. Gore, the rather, precedent-setting case, will come to play in how this goes on as you proceed? Well,
MP, as you know, I am a lawyer, and I think it's interesting to note that in the Bush versus Gore decision that split along partisan lines, what you saw was a strong undercurrent on the part of the Supreme Court to say that none of their analysis should ever apply in any other case. But with that caveat, it is very clear that in Bush versus Gore, there was at the very least, it established the principle that there must be a uniform standard of counting votes within a particular state. That's why I think it's so important to underscore that there is a voting rights violation anytime there are different voting machines happening in different communities, especially there is at least circumstantial evidence that indicates that there was socioeconomic class bias imposed upon how the decision was made about where the new voting machines were going to go and which would have the older, more antiquated voting equipment, right?
Yeah.
So that's one issue. And let's just be clear, we've only been talking so far, MT, about the point-by-point tactical problems that have been reported. We haven't even touched upon the Diebold voting equipment problem, the lack of paper trails in this country, and the very confidence that the American people can have that elections are not literally being stolen out from underneath us.